betrayed during a presentation until this happened. I was humiliated during a work presentation. Then, my unexpected ally stood up and said, "You're looking at the new CEO." I still can't believe how everything unraveled so quickly. I was just another overworked employee, clawing my way through corporate hell. Life sucker punched me with a curveball so wild I'm still trying to process it. It all started with what should have been a simple work presentation. I'd given dozens before, but this one shattered everything. For 15 long years, I'd been at Baxter Holdings, a real estate investment firm in Chicago. Not exactly a glamorous name, I know. The company was run by Arthur Baxter, who, get this, inherited the business from his grandfather. Total old money vibes. Arthur was always hovering, always watching. Even so, I was still just a senior manager, putting out fires, doing all the grunt work. I just couldn't seem to break through that invisible ceiling to get to the next level. No matter how many projects I successfully managed, no matter how many late nights I logged, I was stuck. The real problem was my boss, Tom Higgs. He'd been at the company little longer than me, and I swear, from the moment we met, the guy hated my guts. I don't know what it was about me. Maybe I wasn't the type to kiss ass. But whatever it was, Tom always made sure to keep me in my place. He dismissed my ideas in meetings and somehow wormed his way into Arthur Baxter's inner circle golfing with the execs, always having a solution to a problem nobody asked for. I was the guy doing all the work while Tom took credit. Classic corporate nightmare. So, when the opportunity came up for me to present a new property acquisition to the board, a rundown shopping plaza just outside the Loopy, thought this could finally be my chance. I worked my butt off preparing for this presentation. We're talking months of research. I knew this proposal was solid, more than solid. It was a shot at that long overdue promotion. The day of the presentation, I had my best suit on. I'd rehearsed my lines, and I was ready to show them why we needed to invest in this property. The board was already gathering. Arthur Baxter hadn't arrived yet. He was notorious for showing up late to meetings. Tom was lounging at the head of the table like he owned the place. "Ready for your big moment, Mark?" Tom's voice dripped with sarcasm. "More than ready," I said, trying to keep my tone even. I wasn't going to let him get in my head. The other board members shuffled in, all stiff and serious. Barbara Mill, who had a reputation for being one of the toughest critics on the board, took her seat with a quick glance in my direction. Tom stood, smoothing his tie. "All right, let's get started. Mark here is going to walk us through his little proposal. I'm sure we'll all be fascinated by what he's come up with." He couldn't resist a small, patronizing smile. I ignored the jab, stood up, and connected my laptop to the projector. The first few slides went smoothly. I walked them through the history of the property, the current state of the market. I was in my zone, explaining how, with the right investments, we could transform this eyesore into a vibrant community hub that could attract new businesses and residents alike. But right as I was getting to the meat of the financials, Tom spoke. "Hold on a second, Mark," he said, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. "I'm not sure where you're going with this. These numbers seem a little optimistic, don't you think?" I paused, taking a breath. Optimistic? These numbers were rock solid. I triple-checked everything. My stomach clenched, but I pushed on. "Well, Tom, the projections take into account recent market shifts. If you look at the trends in..." "I am looking at the trends," Tom interrupted again, leaning back in his chair with that smug smile. "And what I'm seeing is that we've been burned before on projects like this. Your revenue growth estimates seem overly aggressive for an area that's been stagnant for years." I swallowed, feeling the pressure. Barbara was now frowning, flipping through the printed copy of my presentation. The other board members were whispering among themselves, and I could feel their skepticism growing. This was not how I envisioned this going. Not even close. "Tom, with all due respect," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I've analyzed the market trends extensively, and the redevelopment in the surrounding areas has been gaining momentum. We can capitalize on that if we..." "I'm sure you've analyzed everything," Tom said, cutting me off for the third time. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "But this company needs more than just analysis. We need results. Bottom line." I could feel my face flush. My track record was stellar. Every successful project over the last 5 years had my fingerprints all over it. But I stayed silent. They were already doubting me, and Tom was twisting everything to make me look like a fool. I could see Barbara shaking her head slightly, clearly starting to side with Tom. "I'm just saying," Tom continued, "we've seen a lot of ambitious proposals over the years. You can't just rely on wishful thinking to justify a $20 million investment." I clenched my fists under the table, trying to stay calm. He was deliberately sabotaging me, twisting my words to make me seem inexperienced, naive. And the worst part, it was working. I glanced at the other board members, who were now exchanging skeptical glances. I could feel my chances slipping away. At that moment, the door to the boardroom swung open. Arthur Baxter arrived with perfect timing. He strolled in like he wasn't 30 minutes late, nodded to everyone, and took a seat at the head of the table. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "Please continue." Tom gave me a smile that screamed, Go on, dig your own grave. He was loving this. I was just presenting the projections for the proposed acquisition of the East Market Plaza. I said, my voice feeling thin and weak. I believe it's a sound investment. Mark here believes it's a great idea. Tom interjected again, clearly not willing to let me get a word in. But the numbers, well, they're a little less convincing. Arthur glanced at me, then at Tom. Let him finish. That should have been my chance to get back on track. But Tom kept interrupting, throwing me off balance. By the end of the presentation, the board was clearly unimpressed. My big moment had turned into a complete disaster. I sat down, feeling like the ground had just been ripped out from under me. Arthur stood up and glanced around the room. Thank you for the presentation, Mark, he said, his tone neutral. We'll discuss it further and get back to you. Translation, you blew it. Thanks for wasting our time. The board members started gathering their papers. Barbara didn't even look at me. Tom stood up. Good effort, Mark, he said, patting me on the shoulder with mock sympathy. Maybe next time. I sat there, staring at the table, feeling utterly humiliated. This was supposed to be my big break, my chance to finally get noticed. I didn't even bother packing up my laptop. I just sat there, trying to process what had just happened. Can I see you in my office? I looked up to see Arthur standing by the door, waiting for me. Great, now I was about to get fired. I nodded and followed him down the hall, trying to keep my head from spinning. I followed Arthur down the long, quiet hallway toward his office. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the moment where everything fell apart. The presentation had gone so horribly wrong. Arthur's office was a large, sleek room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. The guy had a commanding presence, no doubt about that. Everything about him screamed power, from the meticulously organized desk to the modern art hanging on the walls. I felt small just walking into that space. He gestured for me to take a seat across from him. Arthur steepled his fingers. For a few seconds, he didn't say anything, just calculating. It felt like he was sizing me up, trying to decide how much I was worth. My heart was pounding in my chest. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but I couldn't find the words. Finally, Arthur broke the silence. So, he began slowly. How do you think that went? I opened my mouth, but all I could muster was a weak, it could have gone better. He chuckled, but it wasn't a warm sound. That's an understatement, don't you think? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Tom, Arthur interrupted, his voice suddenly stern, has been a problem for a while now. My head snapped up in surprise. That wasn't the direction I thought this conversation was going. What do you mean? Arthur leaned back in his chair. Tom has been undermining people like you for years. I've seen it happen. He's not exactly what you'd call a team player. He's more interested in preserving his own status and the success of this company. And frankly, I'm getting tired of it. For a moment, I just sat there, stunned. I'd known Tom was an ass, but I hadn't realized that Arthur was aware of it too. I didn't realize. Arthur waved a hand dismissively. Mark, I know what's going on under my nose. The board might be fooled by his little power plays, but I'm not. I wasn't sure where this conversation was going, but I could feel the tension in the room shift. Arthur wasn't upset with me, not the way I had feared. Instead, there was something almost calculating in his tone. Let's get one thing straight, Arthur said, locking eyes with me. Your presentation wasn't the problem. The numbers were solid, and your analysis was sharp. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After the disaster in the boardroom, I'd assumed Arthur was on Tom's side, but it was becoming clear that I'd misjudged the entire situation. You're not upset about the proposal? He shook his head. Not at all. In fact, I've been considering East Market Plaza for a while now. Your presentation confirmed what I already suspected is a sound investment. My heart leaped in my chest. Finally, some good news. But Arthur continued, leaning forward. That's not why I called you in here. Now my stomach twisted again. Here it comes. The other shoe dropping. I braced myself for whatever bad news was coming next. Arthur took a deep breath. Tom has been undermining you for a reason. He knows his time here is coming to an end. He's been hanging on for too long. I didn't dare to interrupt, just nodding as he spoke. This was a side of Arthur Baxter I hadn't seen before. Blunt, decisive. I've been planning a major restructuring for a while now, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a low tone, almost conspiratorial. Whether he likes it or not, we need new leadership, fresh ideas. I still wasn't sure what to say. My mouth felt dry again. Was he talking about me? Arthur must have seen the confusion on my face, because he gave me a small, knowing smile. Mark, I'm going to make this simple for you, and when he goes, I want you to step in. The room seemed to spin for a moment. My thoughts were racing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Stepping into Tom's role as senior partner, I can hardly breathe. Wait, I managed to stammer. You mean you want me to be senior partner? Arthur smiled wider. No, Mark, not only senior partner. I want you to see your Mark. I'm planning on stepping down next year, and I need someone who can take this company into the future. Someone who isn't afraid to stand up for what's right. I think you're that person. My mind went blank. CEO, the top job, the one I never even dared to dream about. I could barely believe what he was saying. I sat there, stunned, unable to form a coherent sentence. But nothing came out. Arthur leaned back again, clearly enjoying my stunned reaction. I know it's a lot to take in, but you've got the right mind. You've been with this company long enough to know how it works. I don't know what to say. I finally stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. Say yes, Arthur said simply, but keep it quiet for now. We'll make the formal announcement after the holidays. In the meantime, start preparing. There's a lot to learn between now and then. Still feeling like I was in some sort of dream, I managed to nod. CEO, I was going to be the CEO of Baxter Holdings. Arthur stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. Get some rest. You're going to need it. I stood up on shaky legs. Thank you, Mr. Baxter. I won't let you down. I know you won't, he said, smiling again. Now go home. We'll talk more soon. I walked out of his office in a daze, my head spinning. As I made my way down the hall, I passed Tom, who was standing near the break room. He gave me a smug grin, clearly unaware of the conversation I had just had. Well, he said, smirking, tough break in there. Maybe next time you'll get your numbers straight, huh? I couldn't help but smile back. It was real. Yeah, maybe, I said, the words feeling charged with unspoken meaning. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went home that night, still reeling from the news. CEO, it felt surreal. I couldn't even bring myself to tell my wife, Lauren, right away. How do you casually drop that kind of news? So, I just sat on the couch that night, replaying the conversation in my head over and over. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Arthur kept the news under wraps while I started secretly learning the ins and outs of the job. I was officially still just a senior manager, but now I was being groomed for something so much bigger. Every day I felt the pressure mounting, knowing that soon enough, I'd be the one sitting in Arthur's chair, making the big decisions. Part of me felt like an imposter, but another part of me felt like I was finally finding my true calling. As the holidays approached, things with Tom got worse. He was still smug, still walking around like he owned the place. He knew his time was coming to an end, but he didn't know just how soon it would be, and part of me almost felt sorry for him. Then the event happened. We were discussing a potential merger with a smaller real estate firm, something I had been against from the start. I put together a detailed report explaining why it was a terrible idea, but Tom wasn't having it. As soon as the meeting started, he was all over me. He was clearly concerned. But I think he's overthinking things, Tom said, his voice dripping with disdain. It's a no-brainer that needs my approval. I was ready to jump in, but before I could say anything, Arthur raised his hand, stopping the conversation in its tracks. Tom, Arthur said, his voice sharp, I think you're the one who's overthinking things. Mark's done his research, and I trust his judgment on this. Tom was clearly caught off guard. With all due respect, Arthur, I think you're being a little short-sighted here. There was a tense silence in the room, and then Arthur leaned forward. I'm not the one being short-sighted, Tom. You are showing an extreme short-sightedness. The room fell into an awkward hush. Tom's usual smug demeanor faltered for the first time, and I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to figure out how to respond without completely losing control in front of the board. But his face quickly morphed into one of barely contained fury. With all due respect, Arthur, Tom continued, his voice rising, I've given my life to this company. You can't seriously be questioning my loyalty or my vision here. Arthur leaned back in his chair, unfazed by Tom's outburst. He gave a small, almost pitying smile. Tom, you've been working for this company for a long time, yes, but the problem isn't your loyalty. It's your inability to see where the industry is headed. You're stuck in the past, and while you've been here, you've helped people like Mark back. You're more concerned with protecting your own position than with what's best for Baxter Holdings. Tom looked around the room, his face growing redder by the second. The other board members were watching him with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. I could see Barbara, who had been one of Tom's biggest supporters over the years, staring at him with a look of dawning realization. Arthur continued, his voice steady and unwavering. I've watched you for years, Tom. I gave you chances to adapt, to innovate, to lead in a way that would bring this company into the future. But you've shown, time and time again, that you're not willing or able to do that. And that's why, as of today, your position is being placed with someone more suitable. The final blow. Arthur had just fired Tom. Tom stood there, his mouth half open like he was about to argue, but no words came out. For a moment, I thought he was going to start shouting, maybe even throw something. But instead, he just stood there, completely stunned, his face drained of color. You can't be serious, Tom finally muttered, his voice barely audible. I'm very serious, Arthur replied, standing up now, his voice carrying an air of finality that left no room or negotiation. You'll be given a generous severance package. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. Tom glared around the room, his eyes landing on me for just a second filled with fury and disbelief, as if he was still processing the fact that this was actually happening. He took a deep breath, as if he was going to make some kind of last-ditch appeal, but the room was silent. No one came to his defense. Tom finally spat, if that's how you want to play it, Arthur. Without another word, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the boardroom, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the room like the final crash of a falling tower. For a few moments, nobody spoke. The board members looked at each other, clearly shocked by what had just unfolded. I could feel my own heart racing. The man who had made my life hell for years, the one who had just tried to sabotage my entire career. He was gone. Arthur turned to the rest of the board, his demeanor shifting back to his usual composed self. "As you can see, I'm sure this comes as a surprise to some of you," he said, addressing the room. "But Baxter Holdings needs fresh leadership, someone who understands where the real estate market is headed." He paused for a moment, glancing at me before continuing. "That's why I'd like to formally announce that Mark will be taking over as CEO effective after the new year." The room was dead silent for a few heartbeats as the weight of Arthur's words sank in. The board members were clearly still processing everything that had just happened. Barbara, who had been skeptical of me in the earlier meetings, stood up first and extended her hand to me. "Congratulations, Mark. I know you'll do great things for the company." The other board members followed suit, offering their congratulations and shaking my hand one by one. The shift in the room was palpable. I went from feeling like an outsider, like I was constantly fighting to prove myself, to feeling like I was finally being accepted, embraced. It was surreal. I had spent so many years grinding away in the shadows, and now here I was, standing at the top. I could hardly believe it. Arthur walked over to me after the board members had filed out, leaving just the two of us in the room. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, a rare show of personal approval from him. I meant what I said. "Mark," he told me, his voice steady and sincere, "you've earned this, and I have no doubt you'll take this company exactly where it needs to go." "Thank you," I managed to say, still feeling a little dazed. "I won't let you down." Arthur smiled, something I rarely saw. "I know you won't. Take some time to let this sink in. Enjoy the holidays. You'll need to be at your best come January." With that, Arthur left the boardroom, leaving me standing alone for the first time since the whirlwind of events had started. The weeks leading up to the new year were a blur of preparation. Arthur and I met frequently to go over the transition plans. I was exhilarated, but overwhelmed at the same time. I knew I was ready. Lauren, my wife, was ecstatic when I finally told her the news. We celebrated over a quiet dinner, and while she tried to get me to take a break, I couldn't stop thinking about the future, what I wanted to do with the company, how I wanted to shape it. I was going to have the opportunity to make the kinds of changes I had always dreamed about. No more being held back. I was the one in control now. Finally, January arrived, my official promotion to CEO. The formal announcement went out, and the news spread through the company like wildfire. People I barely knew started congratulating me in the hallways, sending emails of support. And for the first time, I felt like I had truly arrived. The morning of my first official day as CEO, I walked into my new office. The future stretched out in front of me, full of possibilities. I sat down at the desk, feeling a mix of excitement and responsibility. The weight of leadership was heavy, but the excitement of knowing that I was finally in the driver's seat was even greater. Arthur stopped by later that afternoon as I was getting settled in. He stood in the doorway for a moment, observing me. "It suits you," he said with a smile. "Feels a bit surreal," I admitted. Arthur chuckled. "It always does at first, but you'll get used to it. I want you to know, Mark, that I'm stepping back now. The company is yours to run, but if you ever need advice, I'm always here." "Thank you," I said sincerely. "I appreciate that." Arthur gave me one last nod and left, leaving me alone in the office that was now mine. I sat back in my chair, looking out over the Chicago skyline. The journey had been long and full of unexpected twists, but I had made it. I was the CEO of Baxter Holdings, and for the first time in my career, I felt like I had real power, the power to shape the future. I couldn't help but smile because I knew, without a doubt, that this was only the beginning. So, tell me honestly, after hearing the whole story, do you think I handled everything the right way? I'm really curious to hear your perspectives on how I navigated this crazy situation. Whether you think I should have done anything differently with Tom, or if I even deserved the opportunity to become CEO given everything that happened during the presentation and the backstabbing that took place. I want to know if you think I should have reacted in any way and your overall impressions of this crazy chapter of my life, and would really value your thoughts.